There's a line stitched in the back of Alex Eala's visor. 6 words, written in Tagalog. And if you were watching closely enough on Thursday, July 2nd, 2026, you would have seen her walk off court 12 at the All England Club, look up at a crowd that had somehow become almost entirely Filipino, and those 6 words would have made complete sense. Kapag lumaki na, hindi na mapipigilan. Once it grows, it cannot be stopped. She said it herself in her press conference that afternoon. Not as a boast, not as a performance. She said it the way someone says something they have already decided to believe long before anyone else caught up. And what she had just done on that court, what she had just built into the record books of a sport that had been waiting 74 years for this moment, made every single syllable of it land differently than it would have coming from anyone else. Because this was not a feel-good upset. This was not a Cinderella afternoon that the draw happened to gift her. This was a 21-year-old player, seeded 29th at Wimbledon, dismantling the woman who had just eliminated Serena Williams, winning the deciding set 6-0, and becoming the first Filipina in the Open era to reach the 3rd round of a Grand Slam. And when you understand where she was 6 months before that moment, what the scoreboard said the last time she walked onto a major court, the weight of what she just did becomes something else entirely. Pull back to January 2026, Melbourne, the Australian Open, Kia Arena. Alex Eala walks onto the court ranked inside the top 75 for the first time in her life, and within the first set, the scoreline reads 6-0 against her. Alicia Parks had bageled her in the opening set, and by the time the match was over, Eala had lost 6-0, 3-6, 2-6. First round exit. 3rd time she had lost in the opening round of a major. It was the first Grand Slam of a new year, and it had ended before most people had finished their morning coffee. The Rafa Nadal Academy, where she had been training since she was 13 years old, posted something in the aftermath. The line that stuck was this: "Not all victories are won on court." It was gracious, it was true, but it was also the kind of thing you say when there is not much else to say, when the result is what it is, and the only honest response is to point toward the future and hope. Eala's post-match interviews were quiet. She did not make excuses, she did not reach for comfort, she talked about getting better. And then she went and did exactly that, in a way that the sport did not fully register until she was already standing in a place nobody from her country had ever stood before. Let's talk about the number. 140. That was her world ranking 12 months before Wimbledon 2026. 140th in the world. It is a number that tells you a player exists on the tour, that she is competitive at a certain level, that she shows up and wins matches that do not make headlines. It is not a number that announces a player. And then something shifted. Not a spike, a climb. The kind of slow, compounding, almost invisible accumulation of points and wins and patterns that the algorithm registers before the public does. By the time she walked into Wimbledon this year, the number next to her name on the draw sheet was 29. That is not a hot streak. That is not one tournament going well. That is 111 places climbed in a calendar year, and every single one of them had to be earned on a court somewhere. The tour had already begun to reorganize itself around her before the cameras caught up, before the crowd at Court 12 formed its corner of Filipino fans, before the headlines started writing themselves. The seating committee had already done the math. The draw had already acknowledged what was happening. The ranking had already told the story. She just needed one more stage to make it visible to everyone who hadn't been paying attention. But here is the question that had been sitting quietly in the corner of her career for 2 years, patient and unspoken because the sport is too polite to say it out loud most of the time. Could she close at a major? Not one round, not a single afternoon where everything clicks and she stuns someone on a Wednesday in the first week. A run. multiple matches at a Grand Slam, navigating pressure, navigating a draw that gets harder with every win, producing the kind of tennis that survives the second week's approach. Because if you read her slam ledger honestly, and it deserves an honest reading, it was ambiguous at best. Her most famous win before this week, the one that made every highlight package of 2025, was the upset of Iga Świątek at the Miami Open, a hard-court Tuesday afternoon in Florida. A brilliant match, a result that turned heads all over the tour. But Miami is not a slam. The stage is smaller, the pressure is different, and wins there do not automatically translate into evidence that a player can sustain it over 5 rounds at Wimbledon or Roland Garros or Flushing Meadows. The sport loved that win. It also, carefully, did not let it answer the bigger question. She had 6 Grand Slam main draw appearances before this week. She had reached the second round exactly once at the US Open last year. 4 of those 6 had ended in the first round. The numbers were not cruel, they were just honest. And the honest reading was this: nobody knew yet. Not really. Then came Birmingham, June 2026. Grass. The Birmingham Classic, a WTA event, not a slam, but a surface she had historically found less comfortable than hard courts and a level where results carry weight. She did not just win it. She came back in 3 sets in the final, which is the kind of win that tells you something specific about how a player responds when the match turns against her, when the easier thing would be to let it slip and save energy for the next week. She did not let it slip. She came back and closed it. First grass court title of her career, second WTA tier trophy overall, and she did it on the exact surface she would need 2 weeks later when the biggest lawn in the sport opened its gates. She arrived at Wimbledon not as a story waiting to be written, but as a player who had already been writing it quietly for 12 months and had finally arrived at the chapter everyone could see. Seeded 29th. Draw in hand, and a first-round opponent in Renata Zarzua, who, while not a top 10 player, is a legitimate tour presence who had to be dealt with properly. What happened in that first round is worth reading carefully because it tells you everything about where Ayala's head was. She created 17 breakpoints in that match and converted 4 of them. She struck 22 winners to Zarzua's 11. She did not drop her serve once. The match lasted 1 hour and 18 minutes. Those are not the statistics of a player scrambling through a first round, hoping to survive and recover. Those are the statistics of a player working efficiently, moving through a match with the minimum expenditure of energy and the maximum delivery of pressure. She looked, for lack of a better description, like someone who was saving herself for something. Now we know what she was saving herself for. And walking off court after that match, she noticed something. A corner of Wimbledon, one of the most exclusive, hardest-to-access sporting venues on the planet, had somehow filled itself almost entirely with Filipino fans. She said afterwards she was genuinely surprised. She had not expected it. Wimbledon tickets are among the hardest to get in sports, she said, and the crowd found a way anyway because they had been waiting. They had been waiting for a long time, actually, though most of them might not have been able to tell you exactly how long. The answer is 74 years, but we'll get to that. Now, take a breath, because the second-round opponent matters enormously to understanding what this win actually meant. Maya Joint is a 23-year-old Australian, unseeded at Wimbledon, ranked 87th in the world. On paper, she looks like a manageable draw for a 29th seed, but 2 days before she played Ayala on court 12, Maya Joint had walked onto center court and eliminated Serena Williams, the #1 result of the tournament's first round, the upset that had everyone talking. Joint arrived at court 12 carrying the specific momentum of a player who had just done something nobody expected against one of the greatest to ever play the game. She was the day's giant killer. She was riding something, and Ayala had to stand across the net from all of it. There was also history between them. Their head-to-head coming in was 1 win apiece, with Joint's win coming in the Eastbourne final a year ago, on grass, the same surface, a preview that had not gone Eala's way. This was not a comfortable second round. This was exactly the kind of match the sport uses to answer its quiet questions about players. The uncomfortable draw, the high-pressure midweek test, the opponent nobody wants to face in the second round of a slam. The first set went to Joint, 6-3, and in that box score, the question that had been sitting in the corner of Eala's career for 2 years showed up again, right on schedule. "Here we go," you could almost hear it saying. "Here is where it gets difficult. Here is where the story ends, like it usually does." It did not end. The second set arrived and something shifted visibly in how Eala was playing. Her returning became more aggressive. Her serve patterns tightened. She found a rhythm that Joint could not disrupt, and the second set went 6-2. And if that were the whole story, if Eala had simply leveled the match and forced a decider, it would have been enough. A competitive showing, a hard-fought win if she could close the third, evidence of growth. But what happened in that third set is the part that changes the entire narrative. Against Maya Joint, the player who had just defeated Serena Williams on this same fortnight, in the third and deciding set at Wimbledon, on grass, with the third round of a Grand Slam on the line, Alex Eala won it 6-0. A bagel. In the decider, on the biggest stage she had ever stood on, against the most dangerous opponent she could have faced in round 2, at the exact moment the sport was asking her whether she could close. She closed it in the most unambiguous way possible. 6-0. No debate, no clutch tiebreak, no scrambling over the finish line. She dismantled it. And if you need one image to hold on to from this entire story, consider this. 6 months and 11 days before that bagel, Alex Eala had walked onto Kia Arena in Melbourne and lost the first set of a Grand Slam match, 6-0, the same scoreline. On the other side of the net, she had been the one getting bageled, and now on court 12 at Wimbledon, against the woman who had just eliminated Serena Williams, she was the one delivering it. The sport had done something to her in January. She had learned to do it back. You cannot tell this story without the Rafa Nadal Academy. She has been training there since she was 13 years old, Manacor, Mallorca. The institution that Nadal built, the place that has shaped her game, her habits, her preparation for the better part of a decade. Before Wimbledon began, the Academy posted publicly on its channels, calling her journey from the Philippines to Mallorca truly inspiring and wishing her the best for what they framed as her debut at the tournament. That framing, the debut, the journey, the story worth telling before she had won a single match, is the verified, documented voice of the people who know her tennis most intimately. They were not surprised in the way that headlines require surprise. They were watching something they had watched develop for years finally arrive on a stage large enough to hold it. Now, there has been a lot circulating online in the hour since her second-round win. Claims that Nadal himself issued some dramatic personal statement, that he was shocked by her run, that there was some stunning public reaction from him in the immediate aftermath. As of this recording, none of that traces back to a verified primary source in the serious tennis press. What Nadal has done over the past year is speak warmly about her progress in various contexts. What the Academy has done is publicly frame her story as one of its signature achievements. The institution that built her is the institution that celebrated her. And when the thing they had been building toward finally arrived on a Thursday afternoon at Wimbledon, none of them needed to adjust the framing. It had aged perfectly on its own. That is what real mentorship tends to look like when it works. Not a dramatic revelation, recognition. Let's zoom out now, because the historical weight of what she did on Thursday belongs to a context that goes further back than January 2026 or Miami 2025, or even her junior days when she won the girls' Grand Slam trophies that first put her name in the conversation. In the entire open era of professional tennis, from 1968 to the morning of July 3, 2026, no Filipino singles player, male or female, had ever reached the third round of a Grand Slam. Not one. The last time a Filipino player of any kind made that round at a major was in the amateur era, 1952 at Roland Garros. A 5'1" player named Felicissimo Ampon made R3 in Paris. And then 74 years passed. Tournaments came and went. Generations of players came and went. The Philippines produced athletic talent, produced players who competed on the tour, produced someone like Eala herself, who won junior slams and trained at one of the sport's great academies. And the third round of a major in the Open era stayed empty. Until Court 12 at Wimbledon, until Thursday, until a score of 3-6, 6-2, 6-0 went final, and a 21-year-old in a visor with 6 words of Tagalog stitched into it walked into a corner of tennis history that nobody from her country had ever occupied before. 74 years of silence answered in one afternoon.
And now, here is where she stands. Third round of Wimbledon 2026. The opponent waiting for her is Iga Świątek, defending champion, multiple Grand Slam winner across hard, clay, and grass. A player who, in her second round win earlier this week, looked like herself again after a stretch of form that had seemed slightly uncertain. The head-to-head between them coming in stands at 1 win apiece. Eala's win, of course, is the Miami match, the Tuesday afternoon in Florida that the sport loved and carefully declined to treat as definitive proof of anything. This match will be different. This is Wimbledon. This is the third round. This is the stage where quiet questions get loud answers. Eala was asked about Świątek in her press conference Thursday, and she did not flinch. "It's going to be tough for me," she said. "I'm going to try to make it tough for her as well. She's won a slam on grass, she's won a slam on clay, she's won a slam on hard. So I'm expecting a great challenge, but I think I'm ready for it. I'm ready to face it head on." Read that again slowly. That is not the language of someone hoping to steal a set and live to tell about it. That is not someone asking permission to be in the room. That is a player who understands exactly what room she is in and has already decided she belongs there. The room she is standing in right now contains Świątek, Sabalenka, Rybakina, and the entire second week of Wimbledon. It is the room where champions get made, or revealed. And Alex Eala, seated 29th, 21 years old, carrying a bagel over the day's giant killer on her ledger, is standing inside it. Whether she wins on Saturday is a separate question from what this moment means. The win matters, but it is not the point of this story. The point is the door she just walked through. 74 years of Filipino tennis history on one side of it, everything that comes next on the other. She told the press she carries her culture with her onto the court, not as costume, but as equipment. The sampaguita, the Philippine national flower, worked into her visor design, the same flower she wore in her hair at Wimbledon a year ago. Where she comes from, she said, is a big part of who she wants to become. She said it without performance, in a room full of people who usually reach for platitudes, and then she went out and played tennis that matched every word of it. 6 words stitched into the back of her visor in Tagalog. 6 months after getting bageled in the first set of the Australian Open, 6 games to 0 in the third set against the woman who had just eliminated Serena Williams. Once it grows, it cannot be stopped. She did not write that on her visor to convince anyone. She wrote it because she already knew. The sport is just catching up now. If you want to see what happens Saturday when she walks out against Świątek, subscribe and hit the bell right now. That match is going to tell us everything. And drop a comment below telling us how you first heard the name Alex Eala. We will read every single one before her third round begins.